Thank you, Dr. Hardig, for that welcome. And thank you, Secretary, for being with me today to explore the history of educational inequality in the United States and the role that philanthropy has played in either exacerbating or tackling inequities. You're an educator, your parents were teachers, and education has long been a priority in your family. But African Americans have had to struggle against laws, customs, and inequities limiting their access to schooling. I'd like to begin by talking about your grandfather, Lonnie Doc Bunch, who attended college at night after long days sharecropping and began the family tradition of attending college. Could you tell us the story of his pursuit of education?
Doc Bunch, my grandfather, was somebody who was raised as a sharecropper, and he worked for many years on an old Robertson plantation outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. He knew, however, that his hands were made for more than chopping cotton. So he decided that he needed an education, and he found one of the early historically black colleges, Shaw College, and he found that they would let him go to school at night. So it took him 10 years of going at school at night and chopping cotton and picking peanuts during the day. But what he did was he realized that education was the key to the success of the family. And through those 10 years, he recognized not only was it important for him to get a degree, but it pointed him towards a future where he wanted to be a dentist. And what was so moving to me learning about this is that after graduating in 1910, he needed to raise money, and he didn't have money to go to dental school at Howard. So he moved to New Jersey, and my grandmother took in laundry in the hotels in Atlantic City, and he pushed the rolling cars where they would hire college-educated blacks to push the elite. And he used that to get money to go to Howard and to become a dentist. And what always amazed me is how one person's efforts could change the trajectory of the family. And that really began my commitment, which I didn't even know, commitment to education, commitment to fairness, commitment to recognizing all the possibilities that come with a good education.
So Shaw College was founded right after the Civil War by a white Union veteran, and like other educational institutions for African Americans after emancipation and in the following decades, the school received support from Northern white donors. But African Americans drove the creation of an educational infrastructure for their communities, and their philanthropy was vital to that project. I wonder if you could talk with us about the role of Black giving in African Americans' quest for education in the decades after the Civil War, including any family stories you may know.
You know, what's so clear is that African Americans coming out of enslavement recognized the key to their future was education. It's one of the things they talked about, they demanded. And so while you have white philanthropy that helps to create some of the colleges and some of the high schools, what you have is a commitment from the African American community to bring its resources to ensure that children or grandchildren have an opportunity that the parents didn't have. And then you see so many Black families giving money to their churches, partly because those churches use the money to create schools for their children. So this desire to make sure that education was going to be the way that these communities leveraged and found a way out of racial discrimination was crucially important. And what I'm really struck by in my own family is I always thought that everybody gave money to colleges and to high schools. My parents always did that. And as my father said, this was his way of paying back a place that opened a door for his grandfather, which transformed his life, which ultimately made that 4 generations of the Bunch family, including my kids, are college graduates.
So jumping to the next generation, you've said that your father wanted to be a chemist and that after serving in the Army, he went to graduate school on the GI Bill, but racism blocked his path to becoming a scientist, so he became a chemistry teacher instead. Could you reflect on how different institutions either helped or hindered his education and his career as a teacher, and likewise your mother's?
I think what's so powerful to me are both my parents. They met at Shaw College. After the war, after serving in the military, my father loved chemistry, loved science, and all he wanted to be was a chemist. And nobody would hire him in the late 40s, early 50s as a chemist. He got work in some places that were sort of tanneries, but the chemistry got him sick. So, in a way, what was clear to me is that he had to find something that would allow him to take care of his young family. And he became a teacher. And he talked about how most of the schools in large cities in New Jersey, Newark, Patterson, Passaic, would not hire black teachers. So he had to go to a town that was 40 miles away from where we live that had a very small population, and they took a chance on hiring a teacher. And what was so powerful was he never told me, but his colleagues told me that during the first couple of weeks when he taught in this little town, people would line the streets to see the colored teacher because they didn't believe there could be a colored teacher. And my mother got a job teaching in the town that I grew up in for 1 year because my mother was very light skinned. They thought she was white. When they found out she was black, she was fired and she had to go find teaching in other places. So for me, I came up in a family that said, you persevere regardless.
And I'm curious if, as you were growing up and seeing these struggles, if there were conversations about philanthropy or giving, either conversations or examples about philanthropy or giving as a part of the way to persevere, to overcome these obstacles.
The notion was always that you have to give back. And one of the ways was philanthropy. And I remember being told as a very young child to save my pennies and nickels because I thought that was going to allow me to buy a little gift. Instead, when the jar was filled, we'd give it to Shaw College, that my grandmother would make sure that money would go to them. So giving has been a long history in my family because we recognize that you can't do it alone and that there are institutions that were fair. And you wanted to support those institutions that were fairer to make sure other people got through the window that you did. And so in my household, what was crucially important was, one, to recognize that your job is to contribute to the greater good. And that means philanthropy. We would do things like we would do sort of collecting of newspapers and things, and I got to keep half of the money, but the other half went back to colleges that my father thought would be supportive of African Americans. So I've got a long history of making sure that you think not about yourself, but about the next generation.
And I know that your dedication to education has shaped you as a learner and educator. How has your family's history pursuing education in the face of racism shaped you as a fundraiser for educational institutions, most notably the Smithsonian?
Well, I think in some ways, I learned that you have to raise money to do the greater good. So for me, there wasn't a separation where, oh, I've got to learn how to raise money because it's something that is just expected. Rather, I realized as a young child that part of what you do is raise money to make sure that you open doors for others, that you can contribute, whether it's to the church or whether it's to a variety of funds. I remember my father talking about how his mother made him contribute money to freeing the Scottsboro boys, those African Americans that were accused of rape in Alabama in the 1930s. So there's a long history of recognizing that giving money, raising money, is really a way to ensure fairness. And so that was always really key to what I wanted to do. The other thing I realized is that I'm helping to build the museum. We knew that we had to get philanthropy from a variety of quarters. That while we had to sort of make sure that we got money from the corporate community or traditional donors, we had to make sure that this was something that the African American community knew that was a contributing factor to the struggle for fairness, that was a contributing factor to expanding education. And so what that did is allowed us to create a kind of national membership program that brought in millions of dollars, giving their $5, $10, $15, because people recognize that though they may not have a lot of money, they have a responsibility to contribute to something that will move us towards the greater good. And that was really very exciting and really a key piece of how we were able to build the National Museum of African American History and Culture.
I'm struck that one of the things you achieved with the creation of the National Museum of African American History and Culture was showing many people in American society the depth and breadth of African American philanthropy. I wonder if, as you were doing the fundraising, you had conversations with people about perceptions of African American philanthropy, both what it is meant, because it has not just meant giving money. Philanthropy in America in general doesn't just mean giving money; it means giving time, talent, testimony. But in particular, I think in African American history, examples such as risking punishment to teach an enslaved person to read is an example of philanthropy. So I wonder if you could reflect on any conversations you had while you were building the museum on conceptions of philanthropy in the African American community.
I think we had conversations both historic and contemporary. The historic was allowing us to realize that we had to create an opportunity of giving in a variety of ways. Some financial giving, some in-kind giving, allowing educators to help shape our educational program as part of their gift to the museum. In some ways, families decided that their gift to the museum was going to be sharing their collections, their objects, their history. But then it was also talking about a different moment that occurred during the building of the museum, which was that we now had also a vibrant middle and upper middle class Black community that really recognized that giving needed to go beyond the traditional. Some of that tradition tends to be the churches, and that the museum became this example of how you can contribute in different ways to help make a country better. And one of the things that I found most moving was the fact that many churches, but especially I always pioneer the Alfred Street Baptist Church in Alexandria, actually gave the museum $1 million. And so you suddenly realize that we were able to counter the notion that there wasn't a significant philanthropic community of African Americans, that they weren't going to be there to support the museum. And the museum's support, the fact that so much was raised from that community, gave lie to the notion that this was not a community that would give beyond the churches. And that in essence, what we've learned through our conversations is that anything that could be seen as pushing the country towards fairness, giving people opportunities that weren't there, then the African American community would support that with great vigor.
I'm wondering if you could reflect a little about that notion in relation to the history of African American philanthropy for education, and why the story of African American funding of African American education, circling back to your grandfather's story, that generation isn't more widely known. We're familiar with the major benefactors, but we don't know these everyday stories as well, which in some ways surprises me, because most of us are not major benefactors, and I would think we should be able to relate to these stories. So I just wonder if you could reflect on that topic a little.
I think you've put your finger on one of the interesting challenges as a historian, is that on the one hand, a lot of this was sort of kept closer to the vest in terms of your giving, partly not calling attention to yourself, which could be dangerous at various times throughout our history, but also the sort of mainstream media and newspapers really didn't cover that kind of philanthropy. The fact that millions of African Americans gave nickels and dimes and quarters to help the civil rights movement find the resources that it needed is a story not well known. And that in essence, philanthropy has, historians like yourself have done a much better job of helping us understand the diversity of where philanthropy comes from and how different communities define philanthropy in different ways. But I think what is key for me is trying to understand that this community, the African American community, has always looked towards the greater good, which meant what are the ways we can help, especially in terms of education? Because time and time and time again, the one thing you'll hear is a desire to help educate other generations. I can remember many times in churches, there would be collections. We want to help this school. We want to help this family get to college. We want to make sure that we're giving people educational opportunities. So in a way, this is really part of a long history that is only now being discovered and unpacked by historians like yourself.
And I'm curious, since we're addressing an audience that includes a lot of people in philanthropy today, I'm wondering what lessons you think history offers to philanthropists who are concerned about educational equity and access today.
What's clear to us is that there's a lot of data that continues to sort of support the notion that education is the key to fairness and a good life. But it's also a lot that tells us that though so much has changed, education equity is still a goal that's a long way away. I'm struck by the fact that amazing research done by Stanford tells us that a third of school districts that have the widest academic disparities between Black and white students are near colleges, because affluent people in colleges tend to invest a large portion of their wealth in their children's education, but leave out those that aren't related to them. An example of the racism enduring legacy on education is that if you look at a place like Charlottesville, Virginia, where white children are 4 times as likely to be in gifted programs, while Black students are more than 4 times likely to be held back a grade and almost 5 times as likely to be suspended from school. And that resonates so powerfully to me because I can remember being in junior high and in high school and being told that African Americans weren't going to get a fair shot, so therefore don't aspire for college. As one teacher said to me, aspire to handle a broom very well. And so what worries me is when I see statistics of Black students not having access, I want to make sure that they got through a window that was open for me. And that in essence, we remember that just because they're in integrated schools doesn't mean they're treated fairly like their white counterparts.
I'm curious, as we have a couple minutes before we wrap up, if you could speak a little bit more about how you see the Smithsonian is addressing these educational challenges. I think your work leading us to expand educational access is very compelling to me as a Smithsonian employee, and I would just love to hear you say a little bit more about it.
Obviously, you can tell, as somebody driven by education who worries a great deal about fairness, I think that the challenge in the education system means that everybody's got to find a way to contribute. And I think that means the Smithsonian needed to recognize what an amazing place it is, the amazing resources, the fact that we can help people understand science, art, history, culture. But also what we can do is really provide resources that enrich the educational opportunities for students, really ensure ways that we help teachers continue to find mid-career rejuvenation, that we help parents who are now becoming teachers use our amazing resources to begin to encourage their kids to learn more and to be made better. So for me, this is a simple opportunity to say the Smithsonian has always been about the increase and diffusion of knowledge. Let us make sure that we're also ensuring that educational opportunities for every child in America ought to be something that we aspire to. And with new technologies, with new commitment, my hope is that we will reach every school. We will be able to give every student access to the wonders of the Smithsonian.
And we have just a very brief amount of time left. The Smithsonian is also a leading philanthropic institution and has been since the mid-19th century. What is your wish for us as a philanthropic institution and an example to the country for philanthropy?
What I hope is that the Smithsonian continues to demonstrate that it's worthy of the support that it has received and demonstrate that this is a place that is as much about today and tomorrow as it is about yesterday, and that as an institution, our goal is to make sure that we help a country better understand itself and be made better. And by that, we hope to then continue to be worthy of the support we've been given in the past.
Thank you very much for talking with me today, Secretary.
It is my great pleasure, and thank you for the good work you do.
Thank you.